So the fun part about doing a live show.
Never easy.
Are you guys using Zoom a lot at the academy as well?
Yeah, we're using it a lot with the staff and with the players. So it's also a tool called Loom, Loom. I don't know if you guys know that one. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you can basically send a video clip of like a recording or like a video clip from a pro game or a youth match, and then your face appears in like the lower left hand corner, and you can kind of like talk the guys through the clip. And a lot with the staff and with the players. So also a tool called Loom, Loom. I don't know if you guys know that one. It's pretty cool. You can basically send a video clip of like a recording or like a video clip from a pro game or a youth match, and then your face appears in like the lower left hand corner, and you can kind of like talk the guys through.
Cool. All right, let's get started. We have a couple of attendees over here. What's up, guys? So, welcome to the 6th episode of Rain Talks. I'm Matthew, the Executive Director of District FC here in Washington, D.C. My co-host is our Director of Marketing, Aishu, with us here today. And today we're going to talk to Nate Kish about the ins and outs of college recruiting, a little bit of academy talk, and a little bit of debunking some myths. Nate, how you doing? You're still on mute.
Good. Thanks for having me, guys. Really looking forward to it. So the other Rain Talks I've heard are pretty cool. So appreciate what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Nate, do you want to introduce yourself? Give us a little bit of background where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I work with DC United's U15 Youth Academy team. I'm the head coach of the 15s. The last 2 years I've been with the U19s and the U23s as the head coach there. So this is my first year working with a younger age group, which has been really fun and really rewarding just to kind of see both sides of the development spectrum, so having a group that's just about to leave the academy and potentially, taking the next steps in their career with either college or professionally. And then seeing a younger age group as well, which is kind of, right in the middle of their development, and some of the guys with our academy for the first year. So it's my entering into my 4th year with the academy, this year coming up. And then before that, I was with FC Cincinnati the year they were in first year of the club, the year they were in the USL. And I was working with a local youth club, Alliance Cincinnati Elite in Cincinnati, and just kind of doing some club work there on the boys' side. And before that, kind of tracing backwards, I was with Baltimore Armor, which is the kind of the first year they were in the development academy, which was a fun year as well. And before that, I was in the college game, which is kind of how this whole college placement thing came together, where I'd worked at a few different colleges, a couple Division I schools at Wake Forest and Ohio State as a volunteer assistant, and then before that, 4 or 5 Division III schools with Emory and Henry College, Catholic University, Capital University, Frostburg State, and just kind of bounced around a bit in the college world. And then when I transitioned into the club world, I was kind of always the club contact to help the families and the players with recruiting and understanding the recruiting process. And all that experience kind of morphed into Kish soccer placement, where I help players and families to navigate through the college soccer recruiting process. So this break has been fun for that part of it, where I've been able to connect with different clubs like District Rain FC and run some of these webinars where players, families, coaches have been able to ask questions and kind of get a better understanding of the recruiting process. So hopefully that's what we can do tonight as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So one of the first questions, we'll kind of like get it out of the way in the beginning, is how has kind of COVID-19 impacted college recruiting for the fall?
Yeah, I think it's had a really big impact, and I think a lot of folks are worried about their recruiting process and kind of what this break means for them, and how their recruiting is going to be affected personally. So, I think the thing to remember is everybody's kind of in the same boat, where everybody is not getting out and playing, and everybody's been on this break, and it's not something you can control as a player, So I've been kind of giving everybody the same advice of control what you can control, which is you can still control, the video that you obtain and the video that you try to cut from your games and your matches. So you can reach out to your coaches. You can edit that video. You can cut it and find the right clips and put it in a editing software, or send it off to somebody to edit if that's not a skill of yours. And then you can also you can work through the application process where it's actually applying to a school. You can work through the research process of looking at different colleges, and deciding if the college is for you or not. How big is the school? How much does the school cost? What's the team roster like? What's the style of play like? You can watch games typically of most colleges and highlights on YouTube. You can also take virtual campus tours, so that's something that even from your couch, you can see what a college campus looks like, or what the athletic facilities at a certain, for a certain soccer program are like, and you can get a better feel for if that college is something that, you would want to, look into and explore more. So, the reality of it is this has had a big effect on the recruiting process, but the fact that you can't get out and you can't be seen at games, you have to do something to still continue your recruiting process. And I think the video is the best solution there.
Yeah, for sure. What would you recommend for players that maybe they attended a high school and their high school didn't film their matches, so they don't have that kind of repertoire of film to cut and send in?
Yeah, I think for the players that either have the video or don't, I think there's still a really big piece there of just contacting coaches, and just if you have the video and you have a link, you put it on YouTube, or you have a Dropbox link, whatever it is, send that video out and contact the coaches with that video. If you don't, you still should be contacting coaches and saying, hey, when this whole thing is over, I'm interested in your college. I'm interested in your soccer program. Can you come out and see me play? So that contact piece is a piece right now that all these players still have control over.
Yeah.
And what's important to remember for the players is that they can never break a rule with the contact. The player can always reach out to the coach. It's always open for them. The coaches are the ones that are restricted. The coaches are the ones that have rules on them about when they can reply, when they can come off campus to see you play, things like that.
Yeah.
So right now the coaches are in a point where there's no off-campus recruiting, but there's no games being played. So you can still reach out to the coaches. So I think if you don't have that video, it becomes even more important for you to really be good at contacting coaches and saying, hey, I'd like you to come out and see me play with District Reign FC. I'd like you to come out and see me play with, Sherwood High School, whatever it might be. So you have to really give them the information they need to get out to your games. You have to be almost double down on your contact.
Which one would you feel is more important in terms of like visibility? Is it that kind of constant communication, like I've identified a school I want to play for, I'm going to talk to the coach once a week, or is it kind of sending that one really, really well edited film and then kind of waiting for a response?
Yeah, I don't think there is one or the other. I think you have to really work hard to do both. I mean, even if you have the video, they're going to reach out to you, and that's not going to be the end of the process. They're still going to want to know, are you interested? Can you come and visit? When can we talk on the phone? So the communication is a massive piece, and you have to be a really good communicator. So I think, editing the video and sending that out, and even if the highlights are good, is just the beginning of the process for a lot of players. But I think the communication piece is probably more important in that aspect, just because you have to still be able to communicate with coaches and express your interest and answer emails. And show how interested you are by being consistent with your communication. It's also such a big life skill, like the players and young people today, they just have to be able to communicate, to make it in the world, to communicate with their future, employers and teammates and coworkers and things like that. So mastering that communication process is a big one.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Have you heard of any of the schools that are considering not having like certain athletics in the fall? Because I know a lot of schools are cutting budgets, and sports might be the first thing.
Yeah, it's a scary time, obviously, and you hate to see any athletics program get cut because it takes opportunities and just enjoyment away from college athletes, and there's entertainment, obviously associated with it. So I think that um, it's just really unfortunate to even think about it. I know a couple of programs have been cut already. I know there was like a Division II school in Florida, which I forget the name of right now, unfortunately. Cincinnati, unfortunately, cut their program. In Ohio, Division I school. Those are the only two that I've heard of for sure. I think it's one where a lot of athletic departments, like a lot of businesses right now, and a lot of individuals are taking a look in the mirror about how to navigate this whole thing. So hopefully there's no more that get cut, but those are the only two that I've heard of right now. And I know the NCAA and a lot of men's soccer programs came together, kind of rallied together to protect soccer and make sure that there was an awareness for how important soccer is, and the role that it plays in this country for so many young players and college students that's a big part of their college experience. So it was really cool to see that push and see kind of soccer people come together to protect the sport.
Yeah.
So that's the latest I've heard of that.
Yeah, and it adds, even though there's that unity there, it adds another level of research, because you don't want to apply to a school that is in danger, and it kind of compounds the communication piece.
Yeah, and I don't know, how you navigate that one, because obviously nobody's planning to shut down, or nobody's planning to uh, cut a sport, and I don't think anybody's going to actively have that out there. Like, hey, we're considering cutting this, or this sport, so watch out. It's like I think you have to look for athletic departments and soccer programs and universities that are strong, that have good history and good tradition. And I think a big part of it too is just kind of during the communication is asking those questions to the coach, like just really being forward with that to say, I'm interested, but this is a concern of mine. Obviously, during this time, how stable is the program? How stable is the university? And hopefully, you get some honest answers and feedback there. But it's a really tough one to navigate.
Yeah, for sure. Aisha, do you have anything you want to jump in on?
Well, my questions aren't really about, the current pandemic, but I do have a question about, in terms of requirements for playing in college, it could be academics, it could be your style of play, depending on the position. What are coaches looking for specifically in a player?
Yeah, I think every coach is different there. I think some of the things that the majority of coaches the high majority of coaches are looking for are players that are well-rounded, that have, they can get it done academically, they can get it done, on the field. They're a model citizen, on the campus community, and then the larger community of, the city where the college is. And I think everybody's looking for impactful players that are going to help the roster and help to win games, and are going to come in and contribute in a positive way. But specifically what every coach is looking for, I think every coach is different from their style of play and kind of what they're looking for there. How they want to play, what positions they need from year to year. And the reality of it is like some colleges, they have to have like a certain GPA to get in. So a Ivy League school or like Harvard is going to be very different from like a school that has very low admission standards. So everywhere is different from that aspect, and I think SAT scores, ACT scores are always taken into account, and typically those are on a sliding scale. So like the higher your SAT, the more leeway you might have with like a GPA and vice versa. But it's just there's so many colleges out there, and there's so many different standards and acceptance, standards for what makes every college tick, that it's a really difficult question to answer there. And there's so many different coaching personalities and standards on the field that it makes it a difficult question as well.
It's a good answer to one of the broadest questions in the whole recruiting process, right? Because there are so many different personalities, and as a young person, 18 years old, you have to kind of identify where you're going to fit best, and then identify the colleges that you're going to fit best into as well. What's one way that you kind of facilitate those decisions?
Yeah, I try to help a player kind of create a list, of what's most important to them. So, if getting a scholarship is necessary, because financially that's the only way you can make college work, then that's got to be a big piece for you. Then it might not make sense for you to look at a school that has a very high price tag and they're not offering you an athletic scholarship, or you're not going to qualify for an academic scholarship there. If being close to home is something that's important to you, then you have a certain amount of schools that are near you, and it doesn't make sense to look outside of a certain mile radius or whatever it might be. So I think it's just kind of helping players and sometimes the families to think about what they value most, and then create their list based on that. Like some players simply want to play Division I soccer, and that's it, and they're okay to let the other pieces of the puzzle go, and they're not as high of a priority as simply playing at any Division I school. Some players really want to play, they want to go somewhere and they want to have an immediate impact on the field. They want to feel valued, and that's something where you should be able to figure that out through the recruiting process of how much a coach calls you and what role they say you're going to play on the field. So, from there, I think once you have that list, you also have to make a list of the schools that have those components for you. So if A, B, C, and D are the most important factors, then you also have to make a list of 10 to 15 schools that have those components for you. And then, that should give you a good start to think about where you should then go and visit, and where you should then go and apply to, and who you should be in contact with from a college coach perspective.
Yeah. So it's kind of just like getting the priorities straight on both sides.
Yeah, it's a big one. I think just knowing what your priorities are, and then researching the schools that have those priorities for you, that offer them.
Yeah. You mentioned scholarships. What type of general scholarships are available to players?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is I think a lot of players hear scholarship and they automatically think like, I have to get a soccer specific scholarship. I have to get a scholarship for my ability to play soccer. Mm-hmm. And I think those are the scholarships that there's the least of, like there's the least amount of money available for you to go and play soccer. I think that the pot where there's the most money is for your academics, and how well you do academically, and the value that you bring to a college, to the admissions department, for the standard that you bring academically. So every college has a certain standard of what they want, the profile, what they want their students to look like. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to be like on campus? What value do you provide to the university from an academic standpoint? So with that being said, there's a big pot of money for that. So whatever the price tag is of a university, call it $30,000 per year. Typically nobody pays that. There's always scholarships that are available. If you live in a certain county, there's scholarships available. If you're a minority, there's scholarships available. If you, have a sibling in college, there's money available for you. If you have, good grades, there's money available for you. And then there's also federal money available for you based on basically your tax return and the income that your family makes. So typically the way it works is that the more money you make, the more money you should have available to pay for college. The less money you make, the more money the college or you're going to get federally to be able to pay for college. So there's a lot of different pots that are available. And I think the thing to remember is that how many players are interested in going to college and playing in college, and how quickly those athletic scholarships disappear. So, every Division I school only has 10 full scholarships per year that they can give out. So, there's about 200 Division I men's teams. So 200 times 10 scholarships, it's not that many. It's something where when you really break it down like that, when you're looking at 2,000 scholarships to be awarded, and they can chop it up a little bit so they can give, like 20 players half scholarships if they'd like. But also not every program is fully funded, so not every program has those 10 scholarships. So it's a really tricky process to navigate, and it's tough if you're only depending on an athletic scholarship to get money for college.
Yeah. So you would recommend players to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? To kind of weave together other scholarships outside of just soccer, and not rely totally on that playing. No matter how good you are, you can get money other places, and get it done like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the college coaches and the admissions department will let you know what type of scholarships you can apply for. And I think what's important for players to remember and families to remember is that, you never know how much money is out there and how much money is available to you and what type of scholarships are out there. So you should at least apply and visit campuses and talk to your guidance counselors at your high school, and your teachers, because they can steer you in the right direction and tell you, give you links or paper, physical papers to apply for different scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the very least, you're not going to get the scholarship, and you're going to be in the same boat you were. But if you do get the scholarship, and you never know, it could be a life-changing, experience for you. You never know how much you might qualify for. So there's some fantastic scholarships out there. But the best thing you can do is to really focus on your academics and really, put your head down there to grind through that, because you'd be surprised at how much money you can get off of kind of that sticker price for an annual tuition at a college. So there is some rules too about, like, some colleges won't allow you to receive athletic and financial aid. So every college is different there, and that's kind of what the admissions department helps you to navigate.
Right. And D3 schools don't have athletic scholarships, correct?
Correct. So Division III schools, you're pretty much relying just on your financial aid, the academic side of things, the federal money that you'll qualify for, and then any loans that you'd be willing to take out as well. But again, there's just so many scholarships out there that you never know how much money you can kind of chip away at that sticker price. It's pretty incredible. So
yeah, my sister got a random one for just having red hair. And that was the whole thing. It's like $100.
yeah,
And
it's incredible.
You chip away at it, because there are a lot of really random ones out there. It's like, have you been outside on a Tuesday? Here's some money.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I think, you can, if you research it enough and you're willing to look at the internet and use your guidance counselors and talk to your coaches and talk to your teachers, everybody has a scholarship that they know of. And then there's scholarships specifically at each university, so James Madison will offer a scholarship that Virginia doesn't, and Maryland will offer a scholarship that, UMBC doesn't. So everybody has these different scholarships. So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I can jump in real quick with a question. So yeah, you guys are talking a little bit about all these different ways to, play in college for college athletics and things like that. But what are some of these like common myths that a lot of players sometimes have, and could you debunk some of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can stick with the Division One, theme there, right? Where it's like everybody in college and everybody that plays Division One is on a full ride scholarship. It's like, at the very most, you don't even have a starting 11 on full scholarships. You have 10 people at any given time at the most that have a full ride scholarship, and it's just kind of like it's a really I think miscommon thing where common thing to think about, but it's not true, where there's all this money for Division One soccer, and that's every player that's playing on a Division One roster is getting their college paid for. There's not as much money for soccer as there is for football and basketball. You just don't have that same entertainment value on TV, or that same commitment from the university for scholarships, where it's like, I think college football has like 50 scholarships, per year. And it's like, soccer has 10. So I think on the women's side, there's a few more for every division. But the scholarship one is a big myth. I think, if you don't play well, you'll get your scholarship taken away right away. That's illegal. That's a big myth. Basically, your scholarship is a contract. It's binding, and every year can look different of that scholarship. So your freshman year, you might be on this much percent. Your sophomore year, you'd be on this percent. And that's kind of determined kind of as you come in, and it can fluctuate from year to year, but it can never be removed for, playing poorly, or they can't just strip it from you on any given day. I think another big myth is like how hard it can be to transfer. That's not true. Transferring out, if you feel like you're in a bad situation, is actually, pretty easy. And you just kind of go into a transfer portal where everybody can see your contact information, and you don't even have to talk to the coach. If you don't want to, you can go straight to the athletics department, and there's a compliance office that can help you. I think the myth too about like, all you have to do is play well and somebody will see you play. It's like, you have to do a really good work hard at contacting coaches and creating a buzz and telling them you're interested in them to get them out to see you play. And, basically, just like we said, mastering that communication process and being really hungry with your communication to get that out there, to really get coaches out to your games. I think being a good player, sometimes you can never be found, like you have to really work hard to let people know that you're interested in their college, and let them know who you are to make a name for yourself. So those would be the big ones that really stick out to me. There's a lot of foreign players that are interested in playing college soccer now, so there's players from all over the world that are coming in to play. And I think there's also a lot of myths and rumors out there that college coaches only want foreign players. I think college coaches want good players that are going to impact the roster and impact the game and be positive influences on campus. And if a player from France is better than a player from PG County, that's just how it is, And if that coach has a pipeline to France right now, where he's getting players consistently, and they're, impacting his team better than the players that coach is finding from PG County, he's probably going to stick with the French pipeline. That's just how it works. So coaches want to be competitive. Coaches want to win games, and they don't want any headaches on and off the field. So they're going to find the best players wherever they're from.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of a segue from there. You talked a little bit about coaches getting players from Europe. How different is like the academy culture of Europe compared to the academy and college culture here?
Yeah, I think it's two different worlds. I think what you see in most European countries, most South American countries, the reality is like the majority of the world is that soccer is the number one sport. It's everywhere on TV. It's everywhere on social media there. It's on billboards. It's, families grow up going to games and it's in their blood. It's in their culture. Here in America, it's like there's so many choices for players. You grow up and you turn on ESPN and it's not always dominated by soccer. It rarely is, so you have LeBron James on there. You have, Kobe on there. It's like you have somebody new every day from a different sport. And, until soccer continues to grow in this country, I don't know when that culture really changes. I think there's definitely like people who are passionate about the game, and I think it's growing here. And you have people whose families have played it their whole life. I'm not saying that, but there's certainly other sports here that are more popular. And you have baseball, football, basketball, lacrosse, hockey. There's just so many choices here that it can, I think, be distracting for players, where there's in other countries, it's like soccer is all you see. And if you play another sport, it's almost like the reverse, where it's like, why are you playing basketball? Why are you playing baseball? It's like odd in a lot of other countries. So I think that bleeds into the culture of the youth, where, if you get selected to play for Barcelona's youth academy, or, whatever, Sao Paulo's youth academy in Brazil, it's like, it's an honor, and it is your path out of poverty, or it is your path to reach your dream, or whatever it might be. Whereas here, it's like a lot of players, turn down playing for an MLS academy to go play in Europe, or even to play for a local youth club. And that's fine. Everybody has their own choices, but it just kind of shows you where the culture is here. We have a very young league. Our league has only been around since the mid 90s. In terms of the MLS, the U.S. missing out on one of the last World Cup cycles. You don't get in front of as many fans, and you don't have the opportunity to impact that culture. Obviously, what's happened on the women's side has been fantastic, and they've been dominant in world soccer. So I think you see what's happening on the women's side. It's much more influential, and it's become a bigger part of soccer culture here. So
so we know that players coming from European countries into American colleges typically have a few thousand more hours of development, right? So an individual player coming from France might have closer to 6,000 or 7,000 hours by the time that they're 18, just in soccer development, whereas an American might have maybe 4,000 to 5,000. So say that there's a French player, and say I'm coming from PG County. How do I work to kind of close those gaps and really stand out to a coach?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the last question, where it's either in your culture and you love it and you have a passion for it, or you don't, and I think that's the big difference, is that there's players who they just grow up with the ball on their foot, and they have a love for it, and they have a passion for the game and improving, and they have such a dream to make it, that they naturally, the ball never leaves their foot, and they're constantly improving. So I think there's players here who have that. There's players who the ball never leaves their foot. They're playing soccer in the backyard. They're playing street soccer. They don't need goals or organized teams to play. So I think you really need to own your own development. Every player needs to take control of their own development and realize that they don't need a coach to improve all the time. They don't need, jerseys and, 22 players on the field to improve. It's like players need the desire to go out and kick a ball against the wall, or work on their weaknesses, or, go and, hit 100 shots a day, or whatever it might be that they need to work on. So I think it's that recognition that you don't always need what American soccer says you need to improve, which is organization, structure, referees, all these different components. You just need passion and a ball, and that's why it's the greatest sport in the world, right? You can go out and you don't need a whole lot to improve. So so I think closing that gap is knowing how far advanced some players are, and seeing a 17-year-old player and seeing how skilled he is and saying, holy cow, I got some work to do, and knowing what the standard is, and then doing your best to close that gap on your own, and then working really hard when you are in a structured environment, because knowing how much that structured environment can do for you.
Right. To kind of jump onto the next thing, we've got about 20 minutes, give or take, left. I know a lot of players don't know the restrictions on coaches and when they can kind of start talking to them. Could you go into a little bit of that?
Yeah. So the most restricted coaches are Division I coaches, and basically they can't talk to you until the summer going into your junior year. They can't really like actively recruit you, tell you what they like about you, visit you off campus, invite you to campus, for like an actual soccer visit. So you're really only talking about 2 years of your career before college. You still have, I guess my point is, you still have two really important years, your junior and senior year, that are wide open for college coaches to talk to you. It's before that sophomore year and below where college coaches are restricted from really, going after you. So I think if you're a sophomore and you haven't been contacted yet, the reality is you're like everybody else, and your recruiting might be just around the corner for when you get to that summer leading into your junior year, and things can really open up for you. Now, Division III and Division II and a whole different set of rules. Division III, there's almost no rules for contact. Like, they can contact you at any time, and it's a lot looser. And Division II is kind of like in between. So Division I is the most restricted, and again, it's only until you're this summer going into your junior year. So coaches can send you emails about camps. They can say, come and attend our camp. Here's a little bit of info on the school, but it can't say, Matt, I really liked how you played. We want to invite you to campus. We want to offer you this scholarship. They can't get into that before your junior year.
And just because the coach can't contact you, like we talked about in the beginning, doesn't mean that you can't, kind of get yourself in front of them.
Wide open. And I think when you contact a coach, a lot of times what ends up happening is that you get added to like a mailing list for their camps, or, then they say, well, who is this? I've never heard of this kid. His video looks pretty good. As soon as he becomes a junior, we can reach out to him. Or if they know coaches on your staff, they might reach out to the coach and say, hey, can you tell me more about this player? They just can't reach out to the player. Or, if it's a local club, I get contacts and texts a lot of times about local clubs, like kids that play for Bethesda or Loudoun or Baltimore Armor, from other college coaches I know, just because I'm in the area. So they'll reach out to me and say, do you know this kid? Have you played against him? And then, we just try to give like an honest assessment. So coaches are always using the network and, their personal network and ways. There's ways around that rule as well, where, they can reach out to somebody else and express the interest in the player before they're a junior as well. So there's some rules with that, but they can always say they can dig up more information on the player,
Yeah. So something else that I feel like might be in the myth area is college ID camps. Are they worth the time and the money?
Yeah, I think anytime you get an opportunity to showcase yourself, it's worth your time and worth your money. I think you need to be honest, though, about where you are going to showcase yourself and the level that you can play at. So if you're a player who's going to struggle to play at Georgetown, and you haven't gone to see them play a game, so you don't know what the standard is, then you probably shouldn't spend $250 to go to their ID camp, because if the level is too high, even of the guys that are at the camp, or if the coaches look at you and they say, yeah, I mean, he's just not good enough compared to what we have. He's a decent player, but he would never impact our program, then it's a waste of money. You know, it's just the reality of it. So I think players and families have to really think about the reality out there and how competitive this is. And even the camps, there's players coming to these camps from all around the world too. You know, it's pretty impressive, you know, the desire that there is to play college soccer. So, but a lot of coaches will tell you that they find players from their camps, you know, and players have gone on to play professionally, and they were first found at college ID camps, you know, like the US is so big that it's tough for these coaches to get everywhere and see all the players. So a lot of times if a player has done his research and he has his heart set on a college and he goes to that camp, if he's from California, his best way to get in front of an East Coast team might be for him to spend the money, fly across the country, pay for the camp, and, you know, get in front of the coach. Mm-hmm. So the coach can't be everywhere. He has limited time. He's got to spend time with his family. They have limited recruiting budgets, so they can't go to every game. So sometimes you got to come to them with your video, or come to their camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And then while you're at a camp or with your video, say I'm a defender, right? How am I going to catch somebody's attention if I'm not involved in a lot of those like flashy plays or scoring goals, or if I'm a goalkeeper that doesn't have ridiculous saves because I've got a decent front line?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to believe that college coaches are going to do their job. College coaches have to fill every position on the field, you know, and they always need a goalkeeper, and it's their job to look at a goalkeeper and say, well, he's given up only 5 goals this year. And then that coach has to go to the game and say, well, they've had the ball for 95% of the game, and they're just pretty darn good this year. You know, like they're not going to lose the ball, and they're not going to lose games, and they're not going to give up too many shots. So it's up to the coach. And I think that might be a good opportunity to go and get in front of coaches at an ID camp where the environment is different, you know, where they're not playing with that team, and they're going to be challenged and tested in different ways, you know. And I think coaches they're going to do their homework. So if they come out and they watch one game and the goalkeeper doesn't ever get tested, then they're going to dig a little bit more with the coach and say, I didn't see too much today. Tell me about this. Or maybe they'll come out to practice and they'll watch him out of practice. Or maybe they're going to target a specific game where they know it's going to be a more challenging game, and they're going to get tested more, you know? So there's a lot of different methods I think the coaches use to really evaluate these players. And I think a lot of it too is just researching and digging with the player's current coach and asking hard questions. Well, what's he like off the field? What's he like, you know, as a shot stopper? How is he? Is he consistent in the box? You know, how many goals does he miss? You know, stuff like that. So coaches ask really hard questions, and they rely on the coaches to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really, really good insight that I think players can get antsy because the process is so behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and I think that's why this process is so difficult to navigate, you know. And but players, again, they just have to control what they can control, which is you know, how hard they work on the field, their quality and their form on the field, the academic side, the research, and trying to just kind of create your own interest, you know, like trying to create a buzz for yourself and expressing your interest to coaches. And if they bite, they bite. If they come out and watch you play, great. But if they don't, move on and find the next college. There's enough colleges in this country for you to find the right fit.
Right. Yeah. Aishu, do you have any other questions?
I was gonna say, let's open it up to the Q&A from attendees, and if we don't get any immediately, I do have one question. So if you're a transfer student looking to transfer to a different college, can you still get scholarships from the college you're looking to transfer to, like athletic scholarships, or is that a lot tougher?
Yeah, it's definitely more challenging just because you're coming in typically in the middle of a recruiting cycle, typically mid-year, and sometimes you even have to sit out a year when you do transfer. But reality is the picture changes every year for college coaches, and if they have this amount of scholarship money available and it's all been dispersed and given to the players in any for that year, but then one player leaves, let's say he graduates early or he decides to go professionally or he transfers himself, then all of a sudden money opens up. So that money needs to be awarded. So, if the coaches don't award the money, it doesn't get used, so the coaches always want to make sure that they are keeping track of their scholarship money and they award it to different, either somebody else on the team is going to get more money or they're going to give it to a new player. So, I think that's always happening, and it happens a lot at like the top 25 universities, like the schools where guys are consistently going professionally. They might receive an offer for a homegrown contract or take an offer in Europe or get drafted early, like their junior year, and then all of a sudden that money opens up. So it just comes down to how that coach wants to award money and who they think is most deserving, of that money. I'm sure there's dates where if you come in, after a certain date, scholarship money can't be awarded after that. But I think that's probably on a case-by-case basis, at each university. But it's definitely been done. I mean, transfers are receiving scholarship money.
Yeah. I have a question about commitments. So if I verbally commit to a school, how committed am I?
Yeah, I mean, a verbal commitment is that it's kind of like a gentleman's word. You don't want to go back on it, but nobody's gonna make you do anything. Like if you sign up and say you want to go to a school, I think until the admissions paperwork goes through and you, are signing, you know, letters of intent and contracts and things like that, and officially enrolling in school and start paying tuition and getting banks and things like that involved. And I don't think it's too binding. Certainly not a verbal commitment. You hate to see anybody go back on a verbal commitment because you are giving somebody your word, and player coaches will stop recruiting other players once they receive that verbal commitment because it is a commitment. So you hate to see that happen, but it's certainly been done, and it's not something I would advise at all. I would say before you make the commitment, do your research, make sure that you're ready to give your word, and then stick to your word. It's a big part of life too.
Yeah. Well, we do have questions from the audience. This one's from Fahim. He's asking, realizing that the college soccer season is only a few weeks long, how can a student athlete maximize their potential and growth to match those European players who play 30 plus games a season?
Yeah, so a college season is typically you're starting in August and it could go all the way through December. So I think that's another myth, right? Where I think the NCAA gets a bad name sometimes for not offering enough training sessions and games to players. But I'd say players are typically playing anywhere from 20 to 35 games a season, depending on how far they go, like in their conference tournaments in the NCAA tournament. But most colleges are allowed 20 regular season games. And then, you're talking about at the Division I level, they're allowed 5 games in their spring season. And then their Division I, the Division III level, they're only allowed 1 game in their spring season. And their Division I schools practice in the winter and spring, whereas Division III schools can only practice for a couple weeks. So when you look at that, there are some restrictions on the NCAA where they have to give the players off, and they can't offer training sessions, and they can't offer games. And then the summer, pretty much from finals week all the way up until preseason, they're not allowed to have, soccer contact with the players. The coaches are not allowed. So that's a big piece where players have to go out and they have to find teams to play for over the summer, and they really have to take their development seriously over the summer. So when you compare like a European U19 team or U20, U21 team, which is that college age, they typically don't have this same, organization overseeing them that is restricting their soccer. That's where I think the NCAA is certainly different. And, I can understand why a lot of people would be against it developmentally for the athlete, but the reason for that is that the NCAA views people as student athletes. So students first and athletes second, even at the highest level. Like even your, Alabama football team that's winning national championship after national championship, or, Stanford soccer or Georgetown soccer, who just won the, Division I men's national championship, or North Carolina women's soccer, who's won 25 national championships, whatever it might be. They're still students. So, and that's a player has to make that decision. Do you want to be involved in a college soccer team where there are restrictions, or are you going to go off and develop some other way? So you got to know what you're getting into. But if you're only allowed 20 games per season, like I said, how much are you willing to go and find a team to play for over the summer? Are you willing to do that work? Are you going to own your development? If the soccer coach can work with you 6 days a week, what are you doing on the 7th day? If the college coach can't work with you from December to March, what are you doing on your own? Players have to take control of their own development. And if they don't want to do that, then they don't want to be professionals, and they don't want to, or, they don't want to improve, and they don't care to close that gap. So players know the answer to that. It's just about if they want to work hard.
Fantastic answer.
There's another question from Fahim again. He's asking, what happens to classes missed while the team is on the road for a game or in season in general?
Yeah, it's a great question. And some college teams will travel quite extensively. They'll fly across the country. They'll stay, in hotels for 3 or 4 nights sometimes. And, it's a pretty big commitment. So other teams will stay very regionally, just within the same city even, and only travel, a couple hours away, and there's never like any overnight trips or any classes missed. So again, you got to know like what you can handle as a student athlete. Can you handle being away from school and away from that structure? But typically the coaches will work with the players, and the athletic department will work with the players to give them letters to give to their coaches, or, automatic emails that go to the teachers to say, Fahim is going to miss class on this day, this day for soccer. This is, here's the schedule. And coaches are pretty organized with that stuff to give the player a letter to say, here's our schedule this year. Here's what I'm planning. Here's what I am projected to miss. I'm going to need help on these days. I'm going to need this to take this test on a different day. And then they have to work hard on the road. You can still read a textbook and log into internet in your hotel. Like you're either going to let it be a barrier for you or you're not. And I think everybody is seeing right now during this COVID thing that you can use the internet in so many different ways to go to school, to complete tasks, to hold meetings. So there's really no excuse. And I think that's what this whole crisis is showing a lot of people. So it's working with the coaches and it's still communication, right? Do you communicate to the teacher that you're going to miss? And are you proactive enough to follow up when you need help?
So those big life skills that keep coming back.
Yeah. And kind of like to tack on to that, I was friends with the D1 athlete at GW, the school I go to. And if we had a class together, then he would just ask me for help. And so always look to reach out to your friends or anyone that you know in classes as well. And it's definitely a big help if you're missing class pretty often.
Yeah, and it's important to kind of go outside of your circle, because if all of your friends are soccer players, you won't be able to ask them for help because they'll be with you on the bus.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think again, I think it's knowing your limits, and I think that's the biggest thing with college is like all of a sudden you have this, you don't have mom and dad there, you're away from home, and you have all this time in the world where people aren't always holding you accountable to get your work done, and if you don't do it, there's consequences for it, But it's knowing who to hang out with, it's knowing how to manage your time, and a lot of these colleges, they have specific people that just work with the athletes, to help their grades stay up. It's fantastic the amount of resources these colleges offer. When I was working at Ohio State, there was a whole building dedicated just to student athletes for their academic support. Computers, printers, every resource you can imagine, technologically, tutors available, 12 to 15 hours a day to help them out, just every resource you can imagine. Every student athlete got an iPad at Ohio State. So there was no excuse for not being able to take that on the road with them or log in for something. So it's incredible the resources these schools have and that are dedicated to helping the athlete be successful, not just athletically, but also academically.
All right, so he's got one last question. How is the transition from college to pro? Is it different if you're D2 or D3 compared to D1?
How's the transition from college to pro?
Yeah.
It becomes incredibly more challenging for the player. There's a new set of challenges. The talent pool becomes that much wider, in terms of where the players are coming from, and where the scouts or the coaches are, gaining interest from, and who they have available to them. So I think it's so difficult to play, to go from playing at a local club to playing at an academy. It's so hard to go from playing at an academy to play in college. It's so hard to go from playing, academy to a Division III college. It's even harder to go to a Division I college the majority of the time. And then once you talk about everybody being in college, the percentage that actually make it and become professionals is it's an incredibly small percentage. So the transition, I don't think, is the right focus. I think the focus needs to be like, how do you even make it? What does your game need to look like? What do your habits need to look like? How consistent do you need to be? How impactful do you have to be to even be considered to make it professionally? And then I think the transition becomes like any transition. Transitions are very difficult, and players go from a lot of times being an impactful player, a meaningful player, to having to work their way up the ladder again and being, the weakest on the field, or the slowest on the field, or the least impactful, or the least tactically knowledgeable, just because they're being introduced to a whole new world. I also think professionally, it becomes a player's livelihood and a player's job to protect their position. Whereas there's a comfort level if you're a good player at the youth level. There's a comfort level if you're a good player at the college level, where your position is pretty secure a lot of times. And if you get knocked off one day and you don't start a game, you might take it personally, but it doesn't really mean a whole lot for a player. Like, they'll bounce back the next game they might start. With professionals, I think they're constantly looking at it as, this is how I feed my family. This is how I make my living. Nobody's going to take my position from me. So when it becomes, that level, I think players are constantly they're protective. I think they train harder, they play harder, they take things personally. They want to sustain their college, their professional career, and they want to be pros as long as they can. So the transition becomes, how do you fight past that? Like, how do you compete with somebody who refuses to give their position up? It's an incredible profession.
Yeah.
Those are all the questions. Matthew, got anything?
No, I mean, I think this is a really insightful conversation. A lot of information for players and their families to kind of sift through that they may not have been familiar with before.
No, I definitely appreciate the time from you guys and the questions from you guys and the players and families. It's I think, again, it's the college soccer process specifically can be really difficult to navigate and understand. So I think just using the resources that are available to you, from your parents to siblings to friends that may have gone to college, to your high school guidance counselors and teachers, and the coaches that you're talking to in the process, I think can be incredible resources to you. The other thing that I hope sticks with everybody is just like the amount of scholarships and the types of scholarships that are available to players out there, to continue to focus on those as you go through the college soccer recruiting process. But definitely appreciate the time. It was fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Appreciate everything. That was episode 6. We're rolling on these Rain Talks. Our next conversation with a pro physio from the MLS.
Awesome.
Good too. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Actually, do you have our last graphic? Thanks, you froze. No problem.
Awesome. Appreciate it, guys.
All right. See you everybody next time.
All right. Thanks.